We're similar to last week. We went through the table of nations last week with Japheth and then Ham leading into Canaan, and then there's Shem. But there's two particular parts I want to talk about tonight, and that is going to be Nimrod and then Peleg. And I just find this interesting because I do think Moses is writing this Genesis. I think he is using documents that he has inherited or that have been handed to him that have been preserved from the days before the flood through Noah and Noah's writings up through Abraham and his writings and collections up through the Israelites taking care of it in the land of Israel. And Moses then would have potentially inherited that. Plus he's got all the education from his Egyptian background that we'll talk about in someday in the future. And so he's using the genealogical records of where they went. And sometimes it's real boring, but it's just genealogy. But with Nimrod is going to be an interesting individual because we stop and we get a narrative, a summary of Nimrod's life. And then also Peleg, it talks a little bit about the events of Peleg's day, which seem to be the Tower of Babel taking place in his day. I would start with this. I've got it in the notes, but I put a bigger one of it on the back, on the very back page. I did this for myself, and I, with the intention of sharing it with you. But it's a timeline, no different dates than what we've been using, but goes from the flood up until the time of Abraham, and you can see there. I better put a B there. Abram, I got the dates, and it matches what we've got here, was born in 2166 and lived until 1991 BC. Again, that's pretty close. I mean, it's not necessarily exact, but those are if you do the biblical dates as we did on this whole chart and other times, that's the date you get for his birth and death. That means he left Ur right around 2096. So he's leaving Ur. Our story 2096 is when we begin our story, when he's 70 years old. God speaks to Abram to leave Ur. Now, we go back to the flood. We got 2458 BC. And then in between there, I put numbers like 2400 BC, 2300 BC, 2200 BC, and then right here, this is real close to 2100 BC. So these events we've got on there, for example, you're going to have Shem and Ham, and they're going to begin having children going across here. This is going to go across from Shem, going up to Abram, and I've got those individuals written in there. From Shem had a son named Arpachshad, and then Shelah, and then Eber, and then Peleg. And the dates for Peleg's birth would be 2357. So 2357, that would be right about here, 2357. And that would be possibly very close to the Tower of Babel, which now we look at 23 and 21. Abraham is alive by this time, and the Babel takes place right around 23, probably 2358. So we're talking about 200 years. And again, this is putting in perspective, about 200 years, 23, 22, 21, between Peleg and the Tower of Babel, if that happens there, and Abraham's time. So it's not like, ages and ages. It's almost like part of contemporary history as they're still recovering from the Tower of Babel and being dispersed. We're going to put in there Nimrod, and I've got that 2334. So right, 23, what did I got? I've got a Babel, 2357. That should be a little bit more on this side. I'm going to put Babel over here. There we go. And then 2334, this is the time of Nimrod. And so Nimrod was going to live, a certain period of time, and we have actual dates for Shem's line coming at the end of chapter 11, but you can kind of insert Ham and Cush's line underneath that because Shem and Ham would have been probably 2 years apart, and Shem gets off the ark and has his son Arpachshad in the second year. That's about the time Cush would have been born. And then Cush is going to be said to be the father of Nimrod. And it continues. So that kind of puts things in perspective. And instead of looking at this big chart and 2,000 years of history, we're looking at about 300 years of events that are taking place that we're drawing out of this right here. And again, the point there for Nimrod, I've got that in a box, 2334 to 2279. I'm going to present tonight, and you don't have to agree with it, but like I was saying, Moses is writing he's not writing fiction. He's not writing an allegory. Now, some people think so. You can go that way, discuss it, and think about that. But I think he's recording historical events, historical people in a sequence of events, which means Nimrod is a real person, and he lives right at this time in history. I may be wrong on the dates, but it's before Abraham, so it's before 2100 BC, and it's after the flood, which I'm putting at 2458 BC. So this is when Nimrod has to march out of summer and go up and conquer and become the great, the mighty hunter. That's got to be right about here. And it probably is not fictional. It's probably not a Greek mythology, and it's probably not some local king in a legend that no one knows about. It's probably somewhere that left their mark on history that we should be able to pick up on. And I'm going to present to you tonight that it is, my chart, is Sargon right here, who lived during that time period. Now again, I'll show you if we go very quickly to... And so what I can say is there, Nimrod, I think, is Sargon. And if you go to page 3, rushing ahead, I've got to go back and work into this. The bottom of page 3, there are 3 major empires that existed before the time of Moses. Now, if Moses is writing this, and as we read this, we're knocking off genealogies. It's just who begat who, and here's the names of people. It's like yawn, boring, and you just got all these names until all of a sudden Nimrod, and now we get a storyline. So the way I would present it, and the way some commentators have presented it, is Moses is referring to a written document, a Toledot, just like we've seen several times, the Toledot of Jacob, the Toledot of Noah, the Toledot of, and he's got this information. He's writing now the genealogy, but he stops and draws attention to an individual in the line named Nimrod and tells a story about him because he is a historical figure that kind of sets the stage for where Abraham comes from, where Israel's moving into, and all of Israel's future, including end times, is going to be in this area with individuals, if it be Nimrod or Sargon, or if it be Thutmose III, who followed Hatshepsut, or ruled with her as an infant, as a young boy, and eventually took over. And Moses would have known Thutmose III if Hatshepsut is the daughter, the royal daughter who took him out of the river. And again, all this I'll explain. It's pretty clear, I think. And so he knows Thutmose. Thutmose has lived and become a great conqueror up into Canaan and has died. And the Pharaoh of the Exodus is going to be the Pharaoh that comes after Thutmose III. So Moses knows of Nimrod or Sargon. He knows what Thutmose III did. And what's going to come in biblical history is going to be guys like a Nebuchadnezzar, or we can go Sargon II, his son, I want to say Shalmaneser, but not Shalmaneser. Sennacherib conquers the northern Israel and attacks Hezekiah. 700 BC, then Nebuchadnezzar, Cyrus, all the way through the beasts of Daniel. So this is kind of setting the stage. But nonetheless, there are really 3 people, historical figures, that match Nimrod. The one is going to be the empire of the old Akkadian Empire, 2335 to 2218. That is the historical date for the old Akkadian Empire. The Akkadian Empire rises right out of the same area and follows the same trajectory as Nimrod. There's also, and that's ruled by Sargon. Then you could have 2012 to 2004, the third dynasty of Ur. Now notice when you look at your chart on that back page, or right in here, that is where Abram comes out of that third dynasty of Ur, which was by Sin, was the emperor or the king at that time. It could be him. But that puts it up into Nimrod, up into the days of Abraham. And there's a picture there for you of Sin. He's seated there with a goddess appearing before him. And so there's inscriptions of these individuals. And then, of course, you've heard of Hammurabi. And that would be 1792 to 1750, which is, again, before the time of Moses, but clearly after Abraham. And Hammurabi is going to arise out of the same area as did Sargon and Sin, out of the Babylonian area, and he's going to establish the old Babylonian Empire, and he's going to do some great things. He's going to be a great king, a great warrior. He's going to have the Code of Hammurabi, which kind of lays a foundation for it. It's written before the Law of Moses, but it's got in there all the rules and regulations, kind of establishing justice, not on the whim of the king or on, the current cultural or political trends, but actually engraving and posting at several places in the empire a statement of these are the laws. Welcome to our country. Here are the laws. You do this, this is the penalty that you will pay. And the judicial system went to that code for just, punishment. This is illegal, and this is the thing you'll pay for. This is how you'll pay for it. And then Moses follows that and writes the Law of Moses. Not saying it's not divinely inspired, but many of the terminologies. Moses was a person of his culture, of his time period, and the rules that they had for theft, for murder, for slaves, that you see these similar things appearing in the Law of Moses. Again, not attacking the divine inspiration any more than if God were to appear to Congress today and say, these are the laws I want to establish. He's going to have to address the very issues that we're addressing now. So if God were to come in the 1500s and give you a law for your country, or the 1900s, or if it's the 1400s BC and he's going to come in and give you a law, it's going to have to address the issues. It can't be something from outer space, like these are the laws of heaven. It's like, well, we don't live in heaven. We live right here, and we've got these issues. So you see the correlation there. So you've got those three, Sargon, Sin, and Hammurabi, as three very good options for it, and I'm going to present to you, I think it's Sargon. Again, you don't have to agree with that. But let's go ahead. Look on page 1, and we've already gone through, you see on chapter, these are similar notes to last week, but I've changed them. Genesis chapter 10, verse 1, these are the generations of the sons of Noah, Shem, Ham, and Japheth. Sons were born to them after the flood. Again, I do not think every son born is listed here. I think many, many, many sons were born and daughters were born that are not listed. And I do think the sons that are listed are sons that went off and became kings, that became leaders. Because sometimes there's names of sons that are listed as sons, but they don't have any genealogy. For example, chapter 10, verse 6, we skip the sons of Japheth. I got the map there, but basically the sons of Japheth moved to the north, to the west, as you see, and then into the east. And their territory was the largest territory, as promised by God through Noah, that his territory will be expanded. Then the sons of Ham. 4 sons are listed. Now, this is going to be important for our beginning of our discussion. The sons of Ham, Cush, Egypt, Put, and Canaan. And Cush is going to go down towards the area of Shinar, or summer. Egypt is Mizraim, plural, as you remember. It means the Egypts, the north and south, or upper and lower Egypt. Put is going to go further west of Egypt along the border. And then Canaan is going to be placed right in the land of Canaan. And so those are the 4 sons of Ham. And then it goes through verse 7, the sons of Cush. And now it names the sons of Cush, and this is important, Seba, Havilah, Sabta, Rama, and Saptika. Now, again, it says right there, sons of Cush. And that uses the Hebrew phrase, ben. And again, I'll show you here in just a minute. I don't want to make a big deal about this, but it is something that's going to answer some questions. Ben, it's translated sons of. And it gives you those right there. And then it lists, of those sons, see there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 sons, Seba, Havilah, Sabta, Rama, and Sebteka. But it says the sons of Rama, Seba and Dedan, and then it gives the sons of Cush. Excuse me. Of Ham's sons, it gives you only Cush. Okay. It gives you the sons of Cush, and then of the sons of Cush, it mentions Rama, the sons of Rama, as being Seba and Dedan. And then down in verse 13, it mentions Egypt, and who fathered Lidim, Lidim. And that is not probably like this. This is not the guy's name, Lidim. His name is probably Lud, and he's the father of the people of Ludim, because the im is plural. So not everyone is listed. You get the sons of Cush and the sons of Egypt, but not put. Canaan's going to come later. Verse 8 is what's important. Cush fathered Nimrod. Now notice the word fathered is not the word ben. In fact, if you turn the page, I've got the Hebrew there for you. And the first box at the very top, it's 7. You got to look at it backwards. It's in a square box. You can see right there, it's transliterated U-B-E-N-E, or U-Bene, which is based on the word ben, sons, and the sons of Cush. And then I've got bullet points for you: Seba, Havilah, Sabta, Rama, and Sebteka. And then verse 8. Oh, and it goes on the bottom line there. But then verse 8, right below that, and Cush, now in the square is the word begat, which is Yalad, Y-A-L-A-D, transliterated from the Hebrew. It doesn't mean it may not be a big deal, but it's a different word. And notice, Nimrod is not listed with the 5 sons of Cush. You've got 1, 2, 3, I can say them again: Seba, Havilah, Saba, Rama, and Septeka, and I'll say it different every time. But now it says, and Cush begat Nimrod. Why is Nimrod not in verse 7? Why are there not 6? Maybe Moses is saving that name. But it would appear that he's following a genealogical record, but right here in verse 8, he's not only going to mention another son of Cush, which may be a 6th son of Cush, but it may be a descendant coming through Cush. These are sons of Cush. This is and again, the word, I've got it written down here. If I turn to page, where do we got this? Oh, yeah, page 3. I'm sorry, I'm all over the map here, or all over the notes. Page 3.1e, where it says chapter 10, verse 8, Cush was the father of Nimrod, who grew to be a mighty warrior on the earth. Cush is listed first as of 4 sons of Ham. We see that. Only 2 of these sons have their lineage listed. Cush and Rama have their lineage listed. So you have the grandchildren of listed. Cush is listed as having 5 sons. There's that list again. I'm not going to say it for the 10th time. These are referred to as son with the Hebrew word ben. But Moses does not list Nimrod with those 5 sons. It would appear Moses is copying a genealogical record, but does not include Nimrod as a direct son. Moses uses the word Yalid, which means begat, bring forth, or sire. It sounds the same. It could be exactly the same. But if it's exactly the same, the question is, why is he not listed with the 5 sons? Maybe, because I'll point out, he lists 5 sons of Cush, 5 sons of Ham, but Ham probably had more than 5. He's going to live all these years, and they're trying to repopulate the earth. Not everyone's probably mentioned, potentially. So it's not unusual to have a son not mentioned with the top 5. But the very fact that Yaled is used differently and he's not in the list leaves it open that Nimrod may not be a direct son of, but may be a grandson, a great-grandson, or a descendant. I can't say either way. He may be a son, just like the other 5, or he simply may be a descendant coming later on. And if he is a son, he's probably one of the younger sons. And again, Moses identifies Nimrod and provides details of Nimrod's accomplishments. Reading the text, Nimrod set out, and what it says, if we go back and read that, let's go back to the text. I'm on go back to page 1. Cush fathered Nimrod, again, so he's a descendant, son of, somehow, of Cush. Nimrod is. He was the first on earth to be a mighty man. Now again, that's important. He's the first. What he's going to do has never been done before. And if you look at this chart again, you can see on the back page, the gray is the time period before the Tower of Babel. But when the gray ends, Tower of Babel takes place, and then people begin to disperse. So now you're going to have different nations. You're going to have different languages. You're going to have different cultures. So up until this time, they all have the same language. They're all generally the same family, the same tribes, just kind of branched out. Then the Tower of Babel happens. They spread out, develop their own cultures, are given their own languages, and now all of a sudden there's going to become nations. And given a few years, pretty soon Nimrod arrives, and Nimrod is going to say, I'm going to do something, and it's going to be, in a sense, a unique thought, because it's never really been necessary or possible before. He's going to set out to conquer all of these nations and bring them back into, in fact, you will read about it, bring them back and give them their own language. I will rule these people. Instead of every branching out, he's going to want to bring everybody together. As people have said for years, he's the first one to attempt to reestablish a one-world government, a one-world language, which is always going to be one of the attempts of the empires to bring everybody into their empire. The Romans did it. Nebuchadnezzar, he thought he ruled the world. Cyrus, the Persians, Alexander went out to Hellenize the world, not with the word hell, but like Helen of the Greeks, to make everyone Greek, speak the Greek language. Alexander does exactly the same thing Nimrod does, which is exactly what the Antichrist is going to do. He's going to try to bring everyone under his rule in a one-world type of government. So nonetheless, go back to page 1. Cush fathered Nimrod. He was the first on earth to be a mighty man. And that is the way I've got that written there in the English Standard Version. If you go back to, that's verse 8. If you go back and read verse 8 on page 2 in the Hebrew, and Cush begat Nimrod, and then the direct translations of the words, he began to be a mighty one on earth. And the idea there of he began to be is the idea that he set out, he set out to become a mighty one. And that mighty one is mighty. It refers to the giants. It refers to the rulers. It refers to the gods. It refers to the heroes. Gilgamesh was a hero, was a mighty one. So he sets in his mind to go off and become a mighty one of the great ones on the earth, where he's going to bring everyone together. It was his intention. He didn't slip into it. He decided to be that. So he's going to become a mighty hunter. We go back to page 1. He was the first on earth to set out to be a mighty man, a ruler, on page 1. Verse 9. He was a mighty hunter before the Lord. There's the word Yahweh is used. He was a mighty hunter. Now, one of the things that we'll talk about, mention as we go by, a mighty hunter is simply someone that goes off and does a good job of hunting. They provide for their family. They're hunting buffalo. They're hunting lions. They're whatever they're doing, they're hunting. The Assyrians, the Babylonians, there's still inscriptions we see of them out having lion hunts. And then kings would record or have inscribed in cuneiform writing how many lions he killed. Now, I'm not sure if he shot the arrows or his team went out and shot the arrows and killed these lions. Then they'd pile them up, and I killed all these lions. And that was a sport. That was also a metaphor for conquering people. And the word here, a mighty hunter, it's a word that's used for slaughter. If you're a hunter, you go off and you slaughter the animal, feed your people with the I don't know if you feed it with a lion, but you're hunting for food. This is the ideal of going off like a mighty hunter before the Lord, and that before the Lord is, again, we don't know exactly what that means. The Lord is watching this. It's before the Lord. He's observing it. Is he doing it for the Lord? Did the Lord send him out on this mission? And he's a prophet. He's a priest. He's a godly man. He's a hunter, and he's doing God's will. It appears that that's a quote. That's a bumper sticker. That's a slogan. It's like this person or this king is acting like Nimrod. He's a mighty hunter before the Lord. It became a slogan. And when we get into talking about Sargon, there's going to be a Sargon II, and all the kings. When you go through Mesopotamian history from this point on, everyone goes back and tries to make his connection to Sargon I, because it ties into that idea, like the saying, like Nimrod, a mighty hunter before the Lord. It's like, what was Nebuchadnezzar? Nebuchadnezzar was like Nimrod, a mighty hunter before the Lord. What was Alexander like? Well, he's trying to become like Nimrod, a mighty hunter before the Lord. All the kings, Sennacherib, Sargon II, that's why he calls himself Sargon. It's like he takes that name, like it becomes first, he becomes the standard of military exploits that conquer people. He was like a mighty hunter before the Lord. It just happened. And that's interesting, that grace. That's an interesting word. Again, think about, rabbis, the Jewish scholars, but now give that to the Protestant reformers and have them translate that. I doubt Martin Luther and John Calvin are going to use the word grace to capture that idea, because it's got a whole theological meaning. So that's, as a Christian, that's an amazing word to translate it. And I will definitely look at that more when I get home. And like I said the other night, the place that I go, I mean, I've got books, but I'm not sure about you, but we all become lazy with computers. But BibleHub.com, and you just type in the verse. You type in Genesis, what is this, chapter 10? Is this verse 9? Genesis 10, verse 9. You type in Genesis 10, verse 9, comma, Bible Hub. You don't have to go to BibleHub.com. Just Google it, and it will pop up and give you that verse in every translation, that one verse. But up in here in this menu bar, there's going to be all the Bible translations, and then there's going to be this one right here called Interlinear. Click on that, and it will take you to chapter 10, verse 9, and it'll give you a box that looks, well, I'll tell you what it looks like. Looks like this right here. Right here. It'll be just like that, and it's active. Every number, those are Strong's numbers up there, and then you've got the Greek or the Hebrew or the Greek if it's the New Testament, and you can click on it, and it'll take you to another page of, like if there's a word right here, you can click on Strong's number, you can click on the Hebrew word, and it'll take you to another page right after that, which I don't use, but on that next page there's going to be a button up here called Summary. You click on that button, Summary, then it takes you to a page that's got Strong's number up here and the word, gives you the pronunciation, gives you the Hebrew text, the meaning of the word, all this. Then over here it's going to list all the verses, that same word, like that word grace. It'll give you the meaning, and it'll have a variety of meanings, the way it's used. And then you say, well, how? Then you can look over here and see all this. Then it gives you more information down here all about that one word. And so that is, without having to know and read Hebrew, a Bible Hub and the verse, it can take you there. And, I don't want to say that's the only thing I use, because it's not, but it's one of those things I use, like something came up on Sunday morning. And hasten his coming. Because it says hasten his coming or speed his coming. And the word actually is, what it means is exactly what the word before it means in the whole context is look forward to the coming. And because the question was, hasten is coming. How do you hasten the coming of the Lord? Well, you got to start living holy. You've got to pray and ask him to come back. You've got to, Well, hasten just means anticipate. You're living your life here. Hastening is coming, which is the translation, but it also, the synonym, means looking forward to, anticipating, longing for his return. So how do you live? Well, you're not gonna change the day or the hour, but you can change your view of life as you look forward to that coming. So that was an example. I just went down, clicked on that. My gosh, I didn't know what that word means. Same thing here. That's good information. So, okay. I'm back on page 1, and what we're talking about, and I got to hurry here. Therefore it is said, like a Nimrod, a mighty hunter before the Lord, the beginning of his kingdom was Babel, Erech, Akkad, and Kelna. And I'll point this out. Kelna is a city they don't know really where it's at, but it can also mean and all the others. So we're not sure Kelna and all the others. In the land of Shinar. And that land of Shinar, I hate to start a map right here. They always look so terrible. This is the Gulf. Here's the Euphrates River coming up this way. The Tigris River branches off. And then there's all these branches off these rivers coming up like this. Over here is going to be Syria, which is right up. Well, you know where Syria's at. They're bombing it right now. We're bombing Lebanon. Here's Israel, the land of Canaan. This is really close together here. That's upside down. This is the land of Shinar. This is going to be the land of Assyria up here north. But nonetheless, in the land of Shinar, verse 11, from that land he went into Assyria. Now, some of these words that Moses is using, this is interesting, and it's real. And it explains some problems with scriptural interpretation or translation. Moses is writing in 1446 to 1406, okay? 1440. So he's writing to a people that know certain things. They're familiar with their maps, their cultures around them. And so some of the names are going to be, in a sense, the original names from, 2400 BC. But sometimes the names, it's like, well, that place didn't even exist. This explains to you the beginning of the book of Exodus, why they've misdated. The Exodus takes place in 1446. But Ramses is one of the store towns they were building. And Ramses isn't a pharaoh until the 1250. That's not exact date. 1250. So that means the Exodus had to take place after 1250, probably under the reign of Ramses. Because how can they be building the store city at Ramses when Ramses isn't even born yet and there's no cities named after him? Because they were building store cities in the land of the land of Goshen, which is where the city was then renamed. By the time you get down to 1000 BC, the place had been renamed, not the land of Goshen. It had been renamed of the city of Ramses after the pharaoh from the 1200s, but it was actually being done in the 1400s. So there is updating of places. It's like, well, they're changing the text of Scripture. Well, we did the same thing when Europeans came into America, and we renamed, and sometimes you see it taking place in the woke culture, where this mountain used to be called such and so for hundreds of years by the Native Americans, but then when we get here, we call the mountain Mount Washington. And it's like, well, that's not Mount Washington, that's Mount, and then they have the Native American name for it. And now in our woke culture, we're going back and trying to change names. And so some of these things have been renamed. And so that's taken place possibly in some of these things right here. Okay, so those are the lands right there that he goes to. And I've got a map of his progress. If you look on page 4, it's a week map on the page 4 at the top. The center of his city, you've got Babylon, Akkad or Agade, Urek or Urek. That's where he started. That's the land of summer down there. And then he's going to move north up to Nineveh, up into the Assyrian area and build some cities. And that is what Moses records him doing, is coming from, he originates in this area, And then he moves up into Assyria, conquers this area, and then he's the mighty hunter that everyone refers to. Now, with that information, we got to get moving into the text or the material. I think this is Sargon the First. Now, this is not biblical. This is me trying to make an application. Just like we talk about Sennacherib invading Judah and tearing up Lachish, we got remains of that, and then approaching Jerusalem. Well, we have a name, but we also can do some research on what was going on. Nonetheless, here we go. Page 4 at the bottom. Sargon is going to live from 2334. Now, there's sources of Sargon to 2279. That is Sargon's lifespan. There is some information about Sargon that is solid. If you go to, for example, page 6, I can show you right there. There is and that's what this picture is right here. That's a mask, a bronze mask of Sargon himself from this time period. There's also inscription. There's a victory stela of Sargon. You can see Sargon engraved on that next picture on page 6. And you can see his cuneiform name written out in cuneiform, which is Sarugiluga. That same stele is on page 7, zoomed in, where you can see a photograph of the stele, an enhanced photograph of the stele, and then those letters that spell Sargon, or we translate into English as Sargon, is there. So Sargon is a real person. Sargon, he's known as Sargon the First because another guy, Sennacherib's father, calls himself Sargon. Now, the name Sargon, it means, let me try to find the point so you can see it right there. It means the legit, point 1, page 4. The name Sargon means the legitimate king, which means Sargon is not his name. Sargon is his throne name. He's somebody else. Maybe his name's Galen or Bob or somebody. And then he becomes king, and people say, Galen's not the king, Bob's not the king. Then Bob or Galen says, I got a great idea. My name in English is pronounced the legitimate king. Or let's say you have a presidential election and you know a certain person won, but someone else comes in and says, no, we recounted the ballots, we found a box of ballots, and this person is the legitimate king or legitimate president. And then you'd have, I don't know if that's a bad example because that would never happen. Anyway, Sargon is somebody that becomes the king, and to convince everybody, or the propaganda, his name means, I'm the legitimate king. Are there any questions? And then you have to address him, oh, legitimate king, we don't think you're the king, oh, legitimate king. So nonetheless, okay. Page 4, the name Sargon means the king is legitimate in the Akkadian language. He conquered Mesopotamia, Syria, Anatolia, and Elam. And if we go back to the map right here, that would be, right here, there's the Tigris, Euphrates. This is summer. This is Elam over here in the mountains. This is Assyria. This is Syria. And over here is Anatolia, which would be Asia Minor or Turkey, kind of where the 7 churches are at. So that's where he's going to conquer. He's going to start here, move up here, go over here, go all the way out to the island, Cyprus, and then come back and go up into Turkey or Anatolia. And that's where his troops are going to say, we're done. This is the end of the world. We're not going any further. Then he's got to make a decision to come back and then rebuild his empire. He established the first dynasty. This is history. This is not Bible teaching. This is reading books about Sargon. He established historically the first known dynasty. I'm on page 4.4. He was the founder of the institution and history of Mesopotamian military. From this point on, everyone is going to take this map right here. It's going to become a military center. They're not going to have democracy. They're going to have emperors. They're going to have people that conquer each other and rule. And it's not going to be a vote. It's not going to be a Congress. It's not going to be a parliament. It's going to be a military-backed king. and that's going to lead from here, from Sargon. It's going to lead to the Assyrians. It's going to lead to the Babylonians, the Persians, overrun by the Greeks, and on through, and eventually, well, look at it where it's at today and where it's going in the future. His capital city was Agade, or Akkad, and that is on the map right there, above that, near Babylon. But the problem is this city, Agade, or Akkad, has never been located, and so it's never been excavated. We don't know where it's at. You kind of know where he comes from. He comes out of northern Sumer. So if this is Sumer, or the Sumerians, Shinar, he comes out of this part right here and moves around here and then goes up and over like this. Okay. Sargon was born. Here's the story. This is now, you're going to have stories that are told. You got some information that's solid, but then you're going to have stories about Sargon. And because this is all we've got, it's like, how much of this is true? How much of it is legend? But what the stories that are written about Sargon, the life accounts written about Sargon after Sargon's time, this is some of the things we find out. So, we take it for what it is. This is not biblical. It's not engraved in a stone somewhere as a monument, but it is recorded in cuneiform writings about what happened. So here's what happened. Sargon was born to a priestess in a town on the Euphrates River. She had to abandon him in a floating basket in the Euphrates that was found by a man by the name of Akki, who was a royal attendant for the king. The king's name was Zababa of Kish. Now, you can find Kish on the map. Well, you can see the map on top of page 4. It's on that map on the right. It's right there above Uruk. So right above Uruk is this place called Kish. Now, I have a better map if you want to pay attention, and I don't want you to flip. Well, yeah, I do, because I've been doing it all night. Page 6. If you want to flip back and forth, you've got a better map of page 6 that records the cities of where he conquered. And so you can see on that map on page 6, you can see the city of Akkad right about up in here. He's going to be put in he's going to make that city. He's going to build that city. That's not where he comes from. That's what he's going to build. He's going to come from Kish. He's going to be born to a priestess who puts him in a basket in the river. And then Akki, who's working for the king, he is an attendant, so I read this right, Zababa of Kish is out getting water because he's the gardener for the king. Akki is the gardener for King Zababa. And while he's getting water, a basket floats by. Now you say, that sounds awful familiar, but isn't that interesting? The Bible is not, you've got over here, you've got the same story of Moses happening here in the Nile River. In 1486, because he was 40 years old, 1486, and that matches perfectly with Thutmose I and his daughter Hatshepsut, who's going to take, and she's probably 10 or 15 years old. She takes a basket out and she finds Moses, and she raises him in Pharaoh's house. And that's another whole story. But you've got the same interesting story here. Now, how are they connected? I mean, did one copy the other? Moses is not recording that here in this story. That's recorded in the book of Exodus. But you wonder, I wonder, if this account of Sargon, it would have been known by the people of 1446, and this mother of Moses, what do I do with the baby? Well, look what happened to Sargon. I just put him in the river, and the gods took him from there. In fact, he gives credit to the gods. They all have their own gods. So nonetheless, it's just, I wonder if this story, I don't think the Exodus story just made up a story about Moses to match this. I believe what happened in 1486 is a true account, but it is possible that the mother of Moses knew this and just imitated what this had happened. Nonetheless, here that's what happens. Okay, point. He's now in the house. Sargon is now in the house of Akki, the gardener. he grows up. It says, point 7, Sargon, whose name is unknown, rose in the ranks of the king's government, eventually becoming the cupbearer of King Zababa of Kish in northern Sumer. Now, again, Kish is the same word as Cush. Okay, Cush, Kish, same word. So you've got the descendants of Cush. This is the city of Cush. This is where it all began. And it's the same word. In fact, I've got on this chart right here, I've showed it this right here. This is from the land of, right around the land of Kish. This has got the name of a man named Cush on this cuneiform, and it's his barley that was delivered to Cush in the land near Kish right here. It's from this time period or from the time period of Cush. I mean, we could have, just like we have an Isaiah Bula, we have a Hezekiah, we got 3 Hezekiah Bulas, we may have an inscription of Cush himself. Nonetheless, that's from the land. It says Cush. Point 8 on page 5, King Lugazagasi of Umma was conquering Sumer at this time. And that is right here, coming out of Umma. And you can see Umma is right, you can see it on the map. My map is looking ridiculous there. But Kish is north of Umma. Umma is down, if this is Kish, Umma's down here. And the king of Umma is named Lugazagasi, is conquering all of Sumer. He's already starting to conquer. After the Tower of Babel, he's starting to conquer, and they're starting to rebuild. Now, some people put Nimrod as the one who built Babel. Okay, he's the one who built, and that's safe. It doesn't make that direct connection, but he could be the one who's building Babel. But the problem with that is, it seems to take place after that when nations have already formed, and he's actually going to be the one who changes the Sumer language, the Sumerian language. I've got cuneiform tablets with Sumerian cuneiform on it. He changes the Sumerian language and makes this whole area speak Akkadian, which is his language from the city that he's going to build, and he's reuniting the fallen Babylon, or fallen Babel. So again, keep that in mind. You say, well, Nimrod was responsible for Babel. I think, as you read the story, after Babel took place, he's going to be conquering all those nations and bringing them back into his own Babel, which leads us to possibly a clue to what mystery of Babylon is when we get into the book of Revelation, because Babylon, this is going to become a Sumerian city. It's going to go up into Assyria, and soon Babel is going to become Assyria, and it's like this beast, this spiritual force that's taking place. We got to keep going. Eventually, point 9, eventually Lugal-Zagasi from Umma decides his god Enlil wants him to conquer Sargon's hometown of Kish. Meanwhile, Sargon says he had a dream where he saw the king, his king, Zababa, drowning in a river of blood by the war goddess Inanna. When Sargon told the king his dream, his king, Zababa of Kish, decided, I better kill him. So he sends, it's a whole story, he sends Sargon with a mirror to the bronze guy who makes mirrors, and Sargon's, the cupbearer, is supposed to take the mirror to the guy that makes the mirrors in this vat and say, the king wants this mirror remade. And when he gets there, the mirror maker is supposed to push Sargon, the cupbearer, into the boiling bronze. That mission is aborted, and 10 days later, Sargon returns, and the king realizes he didn't get killed. So he decides, because the king from Umma is coming up into Kish to invade, he decides, I'll send a message. Now, this is where King David does the same thing with Bathsheba's husband. Help me out. Uriah. Sends Uriah with a message to Joab, and when Joab reads the message, it's a secret message, it says, kill Uriah, put him on the front lines. Well, Sargon is given a similar message from his king to go to the king of Umma, and he gives him a message, and the king says, well, you're the cupbearer, you're the royal seal bearer, you're one of his main men. I'm supposed to kill you. Do you want to join me? And Sargon says, okay. So he joins the king of Umma, and that's where we're at right here. Point 11, King Zababa then sent Sargon with a message of peace to the approaching invader, King Lugal-Zagasi of Umma. But the message was a request to kill the messenger Sargon. Instead, King Lugal-Zagasi had Sargon side with him. Sargon joined King Lugal-Zagasi of Umma as Sargon's city was invaded, and the king of Kish fled. Now, this leads to a big victory celebration in the city of Kish, and Lugal-Zagi was celebrating. Sargon thinks, you know what? I have connections. He used to have the royal seal. He used to be in charge of all these people because he's the cupbearer. So he reunites the army of Kish. From the king was fleeing. So he unites that army. And while the victorious king Lugal-Zagi was celebrating, Sargon reunited the defeated military of Kish. Point 14. Later, as Lugal-Zagi was approaching the city of Uruk, it's a city south of here. He now is going south. He went, oh my gosh, my wife's standing in the door. It's time to go. Sargon goes down and waits for him there, defeats him with a surprise attack, takes his army, unites it with the army that he just defeated, and he begins his own campaign. He decides he's going to conquer the world, and there we go all over this. Point 14, 15, he united the militaries. Point 16, Sargon then began to build his empire. He built the city of Akkad. He created the first professional army of 100,000 where he pays them. First professional army. These guys have one job. That's the fight for Sargon. So this is like the mighty hunter. This is him doing something no one's ever done before. He crossed the Tigris River and moved with speed to attack in 3 waves. He would attack first. It was like there's 3 stages of attack. Air attack. He'd come with arrows, darts, and sling stones from a distance. Would follow that up with they'd rush the walls with spears as they could throw the spears and use the spears. When the spears were gone, they'd use axes. And as they're causing the chaos, there'd be a 3rd wave of reinforcements with axes. And they just conquered city after city with that 3 wave of attack. The air attack, the direct assault, and then the reinforced assault with axes. Sargon went to Elam. Sargon moved towards the Caspian Sea. Sargon turned west, marching through Lebanon. I spelled Lebanon wrong. All the way to the Mediterranean Sea. He took Cyprus. Sargon took his troops up into Asia Minor, Anatolia. But after 34 battles, his troops decided right here, we don't want to go any further. Now, he's got to decide, what am I going to do? Am I going to, I'm dependent on my military. So he washed his shield and sword in the Mediterranean Sea, marched back to his homeland, washed them in the Persian Gulf. So from sea to sea, he conquered the world, and then set out to do a variety of things. And point 23, Sargon considered this the conquering of the world, and he began to build roads, trade routes, both land and sea, to trade all the way with India. Governments in various cities by installing men who favored him. He created a postal system, created an official language, the Akkadian language that replaced the Sumerian language. Again, that was after Babel. Improved irrigation to prevent drought and famine, provided justice and protection for widows and orphans, created a royal guard for himself called the Nishkum, and created a religious system where he united all the gods so all the people were happy. And point 24, the middle class loved Sargon, but he left throughout this realm of all these nations he'd conquered a defeated elite class. All the elites, the priests, the kings, the royalty, all lost the power. The middle class rose up. Go Sargon. The elites, we got to do something about Sargon. And it goes on, and this became the empire, and he had to deal with that. His son and grandson become great leaders. And so that is, again, what I think Moses is referring to when he says, simply there, refers to Nimrod, a mighty hunter before God. He's talking, and he names the cities, follows very close. And this seems to be a historical account. Again, we don't know what Sargon's original name was. It's like, why is Sargon not Nimrod? Well, because Sargon means I'm the legitimate king. So if your name is Nimrod, even today, if your name is Nimrod, you're probably going to change it from Nimrod to something else because of the connotation. But nonetheless, we don't know if they're the same person or not, but the pattern of lifestyle and the time period seems to match. So that's that story. I'll quit. I appreciate you enduring that. I was really excited to find that out. And I've got some more information I can't wait to tell you about Moses. I think, you guys heard this? I think they have found the man who would have become Moses. You're going back to Hafshetzet and her daughter Neferuri. There's a very unique teacher for Neferuri that had like 93 titles, including royal prince, that comes on the scene about 1486, has a tomb built next to Hafshetzet, and he is the royal architect in charge of building the tombs, has his own royal tomb. But in 1446, Egyptian history, Sennamet disappears from history. His tomb is left incomplete, and he disappears from history. Where'd Sennamet go? But he was born the same time as Moses, disappeared the same year that Moses would have, and was Hafshetzet's. His name, Sennamet, means brother of my mother, which means Sennamet has no royalty, but he somehow rises up and is in charge of all the royalty, and he has to be given a name like, I am the legitimate king. He's given the name, you're the brother of your mother. And your mother's Hafshetzet, the daughter of Thutmose III. Your name will be mother of my brother. Brother of my mother. Anyway, that's another whole story. That's amazing. Check that out. I'll pray and I'll let you go. Father, do thank you for the chance to look into these things. We thank you for your word. Thank you for your truth. We ask that we may hold diligently to your word, that we would hold diligently to where your Spirit is leading and guiding us, and that you would be with our nation, especially in these times in the next few months, that we would again see revival, that we would see your hand in our midst, Father. We do ask that we'd be prepared for anything, that our trust and our hope would be in Jesus Christ, his coming kingdom, and his support by his Spirit and his word. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen. Thank you for your patience. I hope you enjoyed that.